Well, good evening and welcome to the CADS Caithness Amateur Dramantic Society tasting for tonight. And tonight we're going to do a Whiskies of Scotland tasting. This is from a pack from Duncan Taylor, who do Whiskies of Scotland. And it has five uh, 3 CL samples. And we're going to taste 4 whiskies from Speyside and a grain whisky. The lineup tonight is Glen Moray 2007 15-year-old, Miltonduff 2009 13-year-old sherry cask, Strathclyde grain 1990 32-year-old sherry cask, Glenrothes 2013 9-year-old, and Glentauchers 2008 14-year-old sherry cask. So first up is the Glen Moray 2007 15-year-old, bottled at 51.8%. So a little bit about Glen Moray Distillery. The building in which Glen Moray is housed started out as the West Brewery, founded in 1828. In 1897, its owners, Robert Thorne and Sons, converted the site into a two-still whisky distillery. Thorne and Sons also ran the nearby Aberlour distillery, uh, the maintenance of which took up most of their time, leaving the Glen Moray distillery to run into ruin, and it eventually closed in 1910. The owners of the Glenmorangie, MacDonald and Moore, then purchased the near derelict distillery. Production resumed at the site in 1923 and continued with only a single year's break in 1932 until the distillery underwent a massive reconstruction in 1958. 2 decades later, the distillery went through another expansion when it doubled its pot still count from 2 to 4. In 1996, MacDonald and Muir changed its name to Glenmorangie plc. The company continued to put out a higher level of focus on the Glenmorangie brand than the Glen Moray brand, especially when Glenmorangie plc themselves were taken over by the luxury goods retailer Louis Vuitton Moet Hennessy in 2004. This change of management didn't last very long, with Glen Moray being sold to the current owners, La Martinique, in 2004. So the two conversions that Glen Moray has gone through have meant that the distillery doesn't have the most traditional layout, with the buildings forming not the most aesthetically pleasing square. However, Glen Moray is an excellent example of why a distillery should not be judged by its cover, and it has gained a reputation as being one of the friendliest distilleries to visit. Has a lovely visitor centre, lovely coffee, lovely cafe, nice shop. I've never actually done a tour of Glen Moray, which is surprising because my wife hails from Elgin. So Glen Moray's production capacity sits at a very respectable 2.3 million litres a year. The water is drawn from the nearby River Lossy, and one of the unique distinguishing facets of the distillation process at Glen Moray is that the condensers are located outside of the still room. Glen Moray has 2 wash stills, which each have a 9.9 thousand litre capacity, and 2 wash stills, which have a 5.8 thousand litre capacity. Both the wash stills and the spirit stills have a pear shape, and they're shorter than the average stills, with a wide base and thick neck. It did operate with just 1 wash still and 1 spirit still until 1979, when that was doubled, and The current pot stills at the distillery were installed in 1992. Glen Moray used its own floor maltings until 1958, when they were replaced with a Saladin's box, which was used for 2 decades until malting at the distillery was completely decommissioned in 1978. The distillery now sources its maltings from an industrial site, although they are grown locally. The maltings used in the production of the whiskey are unpeated. In most recent years, though, Glen Moray has started experimenting with using peated maltings, producing its first ever batch of peated spirit in 2009. And in fact, they do have a warehouse at the Cigar Warehouse 1 where they do quite a lot of experimentation. And the two latest bottlings from Warehouse 1 are both Ryoko Cask finished whiskies, one of which is unpeated and the other which is peated, and look forward to trying them at some point. As part of the tour of the site offered at the distillery, it's possible to visit Glen Moray's bonded warehouse. And as you stand there surrounded by thousands of casks of single malt, you can witness row upon row of barrels slowly turning from raw spirit into matured single malt. To help illustrate this process, Glen Moray has 2 casks fitted with transparent ends so that you can observe how much spirit is lost to the angel share, as well as to see how different charring techniques on the inside of a barrel can influence the colour of the whiskey. Glen Moray uses mostly ex-bourbon casks sourced from the United States to age their single malt in. So what kind of whiskey is Glen Moray? Well, it has a wide selection of official bottlings, which include a 10-year-old and a 12-year-old. There's a history of maturing in wine barrels, Chenin Blanc, Chardonnay, although they're not as plentiful as the official bottlings. But there are also a few independent bottlings available on the market. Duncan Taylor, as we're going to taste in a moment, has performed most of these bottlings. Their Glen Moray range, including this one, it also includes an 11-year-old, a 20-year-old, a 22-year-old, all of which date from the 1990s. Glen Moray is also used in the whiskey label 5 blend, which is also owned by the distillery's current owners, La Martinique. So what have we got here tonight? Well, it was matured in oak cask number 705 934 for 15 years. It's one of only 236 bottles, and it was bottled in 2023 at cask strength 51.8%, non-chill filtered and natural colouring. It's from the single cask collection of Duncan Taylor, which is a range of single malt and single grain whiskies from across the length and breadth of Scotland. They're bottled from single cask at cask strength, and they allow a look at the diversity and influence of individual casks. And they're unrepeatable expressions, and they come from both renowned and lesser known distilleries. They're not chill filtered, they're not coloured, and they try to use only the finest whiskies, ensuring that each release delivers the multidimensional character of the distillery. So let's see how successful they've been here. So this is very pale. You can see this is definitely an ex-bourbon cask. And it has nice tears. Not a high level of viscosity, but it has nice tears. Quite slow tears. We'll try the nose. I've tasted a lot of Glen Moray, and I do always find it such a pleasant nose. And this is like that, you know, it's honeydew melon, summer fruits. icing sugar, and jelly beans. And there's a soft spice there too. And buttery fruit pastries and sweet nutty yogurt with a touch of licorice and dry oak. And the sort of lemon candles and marzipan and honey. And you also get that classic foam banana smell of the Glen Moray, which is one of the trademarks, especially when it's been an ex-bourbon. Toasted marshmallow, vanilla ice cream, and a hint of waxy apple. The tears are building here. We'll try this on the mouth. Again, it's the strawberry ice cream, honey. It's quite zesty. And there's a host of warming cinnamon, star anise, and gentle pepper, but that's kept in check by the vanilla pod and the milky coffee. And then you get the citrus, the lemon, and the oranges, ginger, spring honey, and grapes. It's creamy, and there's honeyed cereals and milky coffee, and a touch of star anise and cinnamon spiciness, but vanilla does mellow it all out. You do get the foam bananas again. We'll see it finish. And the summer finish is like summer fruits, and with a hint of juicy oranges and delicate spice and a touch of oak. Sort of medium length finish. Butterscotch, poached peach, and a touch of charred marshmallow, keeping things quite sweet. It's a medium, lemon peppery and a little dry. Caramelized nuts and banana fritters. I'm going to try 4 drops of water in this. Actually, I ended up with 5 there. This is recorded the day after the summer solstice, when in this far northern location in Scotland, we do get quite long summer days. It doesn't really get dark till after midnight, and it gets light again about 3 or so in the morning. But I do see the classic Scotch mist with this. And the water does change it. You get more of an oatmeal, green apple, star fruit, grapefruit, and unripe banana. Buttery fruit pastries and sweet nutty yogurt with a touch of licorice and dry oak. It's sweet as it opens up with white chocolate and caramel. And a hint of charred oak smokiness develops. This is unpeated though. And on the mouth, it's a cane sugar, caramel, popcorn, pecan nut, a hint of star anise, a bit of herbiness, thyme, dried herbs. There is a host of warming cinnamon and gentle pepper, but that's kept in check by the fresh vanilla pod and the milky coffee again. Uh, Crumbly fudge with a few sea salt flakes. And you get the banana fritters again. And chocolate raisins. On the finish, it's less sweet with water, cinnamon and ground ginger. So I thought that was very tasty. I love the nose. I always like the nose of Glen Moray. On the mouth, I wasn't quite so sure. Uh, and the finish, not so sure either. An enjoyable whiskey. It's tasty, but it doesn't blow me away. It's not very complex, and I did expect a little more from it. Single cask, 51.8, non-coloured, non-chill filtered. Uh, it's nice, pleasant, very drinkable. Uh, Middle of the road whiskey for me. So we'll cleanse our palate. And tonight I'm on Peter's Yard sourdough crackers. So next we're moving along the road a little to Miltonduff. So we've got a Miltonduff 2009 13-year-old sherry cask matured, bottled at 53.9%. So Miltonduff, well, Andrew Peary and Robert Bain founded Miltonduff Distillery in 1824. It had previously operated illicitly on the site since the turning of the century. But following the passing of the Excise Act, Peary and Bain established the distillery as a legitimate business operation. And after debuting to a successful start in 1866, the distillery was purchased by William Stewart. In 1895, Thomas Yule and Company became part owners of the site, and a few years later, Yule went on to complete control of the distillery. In 1936, they sold the site on to Hiram Walker. The year before that, Hiram Walker had acquired George Ballantyne's and Son, thanks to the enormous profits they had made during Prohibition by smuggling alcohol into America. And the company had decided to expand their operations into Scotland to ensure that they would have enough single malt to compete with demand. Following their acquisition, Hiram Walker immediately transferred the management over to Ballantyne's. In 1964, a pair of Lomond stills were installed at the distillery to start producing the Moss Towie single malt. And Ballantyne's were responsible for developing the design of the Lomond single malt pot stills, which was one of the reasons that the pot stills were installed at the site. In 1974, a major reconstruction was launched and the number of pot stills was increased. In 1981, the Lomond stills were removed, therefore eliminating the production of Mostowie. The Lomond stills were replaced by regular pot stills to keep up the production levels. In 1986, most of the Hiram Walker stocks were acquired by Allied Domecq, and in 1987 they acquired the rest of the company. In 2005, Pernod Ricard acquired Miltonduff through the corporate merger of Allied and Pernod. So Miltonduff has a production capacity of 5.5 million litres, so it's a big producer. It used to be Allied Distillers' largest distillery. Even following Pernod Ricard's takeover of Allied Domecq, the distillery still has one of the largest capacities in the groups, with only Glenlivet's capacity being greater. The water used is taken from the Blackburn, and as Mostowie was produced in a pair of pot stills on the site, production capacity has been lost since the closure of that site. 6 pot stills are used in the production of Miltonduff, and the 3 wash stills each have an 18,000 litre capacity, and the 3 spirit stills a 17,500 litre capacity. So the malt used for Mostowie was lightly peated, which resulted in a soft, smoky taste, while the malt used in the production of Miltonduff, which we're going to taste in a moment, was completely unpeated. The malt for both single malts was sourced from an industrial source in Speyside. It has an extensive warehouse complex with both dunnage and racked warehouses, and it uses a combination of American white oak and sherry cask in which the single malt is aged. There are 2 official single malts released from Miltonduff. Miltonduff and Mostowie. The distillery has released a number of official expressions of Miltonduff, including a 10-year-old and a 12-year-old. But most of them date from the 1970s, 80s, and 90s. In addition to these official releases, there have been several independent releases. Gordon MacPhail have released a 10-year-old and a 15-year-old bottling, both of which were released on behalf of the distillery in a semi-official manner. And Douglas Lang has released a 22-year-old bottling. It's never released an official bottling of Mostowie, as it was launched to be as a component in the Hiram Walker blends. There were a number of independent bottlings of Mostowie, a 30-year-old by Duncan Taylor, and a 12-year-old bottling and a 20-year-old bottling by Gordon and MacPhail. Mostowie was used as a major component in several blends that were owned by Hiram Walker, including the Ballantine's blend. So this one has been put into a sherry cask, and it was distilled in 2009 and bottled in 2023, and produced 282 bottles, and it was bottled at 53.9% ABV. So let's see if we've got a sherry bomb here. It is certainly dark. "13-year-old, non-coloured, unchill filtered." And it has fantastic tears. Lovely church windows in. Let's see. Yeah, you can tell this is a sherry bomb. It's fruit cake and cinnamon with a hint of pepper and stewed red apples. It's clearly got sherry oak influence. dates and figs, and toasted orange peel. Tiramisu liqueur, and then you get the dark fruits, the jammy plums and the cherries. In the middle, there's a more of an oak season with sweet spices, cinnamon, cloves, and a whiff of star anise, and pine nuts. And at the base, there's a whiff of bitter herbs, and then toasted almonds, some fruits, a little earthiness, and fruit and honey. We'll try this on the mouth. And you get the vanilla and the toasted oak, but along with black currants and honey. It's on the mouth. It's quite thick and almost syrupy, and the spicy oak. There's a sweet but drying mouthfeel. There's plenty of ripe dark fruits, plums and cherries, and nuts toasted with caramel, and a slightly burnt creme brulee topping that's sweet and mildly bitter. The sherry influence is huge. It's got fruitiness and nuttiness, and it lasts into the mid palate and into the aftertaste, fruit and honey. And the finish is it's complex and fruity with more pepper and dried winter berries. Medium length and a slowly drying finish. The sweet cherry oak continues to linger on the palate alongside the soft, peppery spices. And there's quite a long aftertaste of luscious fruits. I'm going to try 5 drops of water in this. It was at 53.9%. Ah, you get lovely Scotch mist there. Now I get struck match. You get the sulphur, which is quite invasive. Beyond that, you get sort of fresh wet wood, forest floor, pickled cherries, raisins, and then you get that leatheriness from the sherry cask. I think the sherry cask here, the sherry barrel, has certainly been quite wet, and it's really charged the Miltonduff. Over time, you get some citrus fruits, vanilla, and chocolate also appear. We'll try them out. And that charged cherry cask is immediately apparent. You get berries, dried fruit, and a relatively strong oak spice with dark chocolate and pepper. And the finish is quite smooth, creamy, red fruits, berries, and cherries, with a vanilla sweetness. It's a medium long finish, some earthy touch of the autumn forest. And later the finish gets more intense and longer, and more earthy and longer in time. Does this taste good? Yes, it's a good sherry cask. Is it something I'd buy? I doubt it. The cask finish is so active that the distillery character is almost wiped away. And when you consider that Miltonduff, in the first place, is a blending malt with a gentle character, if you want a sherry bomb that's good and affordable, this would be it. But if you're looking for complexities, I'm not so sure. Maybe soon enough we'll have to start flavour grouping whiskies instead of associating them with regions, which may be less and less relevant as technologies and whisky science advances. So we'll cleanse our palates. So we're going to have a grain mix, and it's a Strathclyde 1990 32-year-old sherry cask matured whiskey. So Glasgow Distilleries, until the opening of its new single malt plant, were kept as far out of the public's knowledge as possible, which wasn't an easy feat when one of them, Port Dundas, was a massive steaming building on the top of a hill. But the other, and now only grain distillery, has been successful. Strathclyde Distillery is in the Gorbals on the south side of the River Clyde, opposite Glasgow Green. And it's nice to think that an operation so dependent on steam should be located so close to the park where James Watt was struck by the inspiration for his vapour-driven engine. The distillery is on the site of an old cotton mill, which was initially built by London distiller Seager Evans in 1927, mainly to supply neutral grain spirit for its gins. In 1936, Seager Evans moved into Scotch with the purchase of the Long John brand. In 1957, like many grain distilleries, Strathclyde secreted a malt plant called Kinclaith inside its walls. This ran from 1957 to 1975 when it was removed to make way for a two-phase expansion of the grain neutral spirit side of the operation. And at the same time, the firm's blending and warehousing site next door was demolished. Long John Distilleries, as Seager Evans' whisky division was named, went through several hands, eventually ending up within Allied distillers, by which time Strathclyde would also have been supplying some of the grain to the Ballantines and Teachers blends. It's now part of the Pernod Ricard stable and still amazingly goes unnoticed by the strollers along the banks of the Clyde. Has a capacity of 40 million litres per annum. It cooks for 4 hours per fermenter. It uses an interconnected sieve tray columns. Fermentation time is 50 hours. It, of course, uses wheat. It's a grain. Malted barley, 9% percentage. New make strength is 94.5%. And the number of columns stills is 2. And it uses town mains water, so that will come from Loch Katrine, Glasgow's reservoir. So the grain whisky produced at Strathclyde is intended for developing blends, and as such there's no official bottling. However, the Scottish Malt Whisky Society and other independent bottlers have purchased and bottled some aged casks of this as single cask, single grain whisky. And this is going to be a 32-year-old that has matured in a very active Oloroso cask. Judging by the colour, that looks a bit like cola, at cask strength, obviously. So, single cask, sherry matured whiskey, and it's got nice tears. It's not as dark as you would think after 32 years in a sherry cask. But let's see where we go with this. Nice tears in it. Sugar coated almonds. Red apple skins. It's fresh and floral. There's red grapes. It's earthy with a slightly salty note. Lots of oranges and nectarines and a wisp of plum pudding, which showcases the depth of fruit. And slightly peppery. And a hint of whipped cream and oak and crushed biscuits, crushed custard creams. We'll try them out. It's spicier than it was in the nose. It's quite herbal and fresh mint, which balances the sweetness and nicely coats the mouth. Blackberries and blueberries and honeycomb and bitter dark chocolate. Rich cocoa and espresso. Single cream and marshmallows. The spicy oakiness and nutmeg, which creates another dimension to giving an almost earthy note. Massive tears in it. For a grain, it's full-bodied and powerful, and it's packed full of both fruits and spice. And on the finish, dried fruits emerge, and the nuttiness of the nose returns. Dark chocolate, and lots of blackberries and nutmeg. There's a burst of spice, and it mellows out to a delicate finish of sweetness and dried fruits. There's almost an earthy note to the finish, and a drying aspect too. That sherried oak gives it a bitterness. And the plum pudding, which you would expect from the sherry cask, comes back, offering the sweetness. It's a complex and fruity finish to a nice sherried whiskey. I'm going to try. This one was at 53.9%, so I'm going to try 6 drops. A little wiggly jiggly, roly stroly. Let's see. And we do have that wonderful Scotch mistake. And I think with water it is more attractive. It's like a buttery, or a rally, depending which part of the northeast you favour. It's been new baked, and there's fresh fruit. It's like a Danish pastry with caramelized pears and forest fruits. It's like doughy pastry. And you know, these millionaire shortbread with the salted caramel and the dark chocolate and the dark brown sugar. And there's soft notes of toasted oak and vanilla. And there's a soft tang of sweet citrus. Try them out. It's like a stack of pancakes smothered in oak smoked maple syrup and salted butter. It's quite multi-layered and it's quite complex. It's got more chocolate than the nose. Uh, it's like milk chocolate covered raisins and peanuts. Very creamy with the fruits of the nose, persistent. And it has a gentle spiciness of cinnamon and nutmeg with some toasted oak that warms the palate. And the finish is stewed summer berries and soft brown sugar that offsets the warming spiciness. It's very fresh and it appears delicate, but with a surprising amount of power and heft underneath it. And as the spices fade, the sweetness returns. It's quite a lengthy finish with water. I think this is a very good swimmer. I think I prefer it with water. I think this is a grain that scores with very dark fruit flavors. But unfortunately, it's not as complex as you would expect for its 32 years. And the alcohol content is barely noticeable. And the grain does shine through. It's very drinkable, but Not my favourite, I think. I'm going to cleanse my palate again. So, next we're going to Keith, and it's Glenrothes, 2013 9-year-old, bottled at 54.4%. So, the Glenrothes distillery in Rothes is in the heart of Speyside, and it looks back on a very turbulent history. The day the first spirit was distilled at Glenrothes was the 28th of December 1879. And that could have been a bad omen, as it was the day that the Tay Bridge at the crossing of the River Tay at Dundee collapsed. Several times the Glenrothes was hit by fire and it burnt down finally. But its phoenix rose again, and today it's back on the stage and playing a big role in the whiskey game. And it was in 1878 that the work began at the site of a former sawmill. James Stewart started to build the distillery, but because of financial problems, Robert Dick and William Grant took over and completed the building and started production in December 1879. The economic situation got better and there was a big demand for whiskey. And in 1887, when Glenrothes and Bunnahabhain formed Highland Distillers, the annual production of the Speyside distillery was already 360,000 litres, and it increased to 1.36 million litres in 1898. After, in 1896, two more stills had been installed. But fires in 1897 and 1922 caused damages, and an explosion in 1903 had nearly destroyed the distillery. But it was always repaired and rebuilt again. Prohibition, the First World War, and the Wall Street crash in 1929 achieved what the fires didn't. Production went down and the distillery was closed down. But not for long. And soon after the end of the Glenrothes stands were back in business. In 1963, a third pair of stills was installed, and heating changed from direct fire to internal steam. And in 1979, a fourth pair of stills was installed. So the Glenrothes is situated at the foot at the Manach Hills beside the Rothes Burn. Two natural springs, the Ardcanny and the Brochile, that also feed the burn, are the natural water sources Glenrothes uses. Malting is not done at the Glenrothes, but it doesn't come from far away. Malting happens at 12 miles away. Milling, mashing, distilling are done at the Glenrothes, as it is proud to have their own cooperage on site, which is still very uncommon today. So in 1999, the Edgerton Group bought Highland Distillers, including the Glenrothes, but they sold the distillery to Berry Brothers and Rudd in 2010. But then it was sold uh, back to the Edgerton Group owners of the Macallan and Highland Park. So mashing at Glenrothes is done in a large mash tun with a capacity of 5 tons. The tun is copper topped and filled 3 times with hot water for each mashing. The first 2 waters that wash out the sugar from the malt, the so-called wort, is cooled down and led into the washbacks. The third water washes out the little rest of the sugar and used to be the first water for the next mashing. 20 washbacks are the hosts for the fermenting wort, each of them with a capacity of 25,560 litres. 12 of them are made of Oregon pine, 8 of stainless steel. Distiller's yeast is used for fermentation, which lasts about 55 hours at Glenrothes and ends up with a beer of 8.8% ABV. Glenrothes has 10 pot stills, 5 wash stills and 5 spirit stills. And they work pairwise because of their high shape. They produce a light, fruity and elegant spirit. The heart of the run makes up about 20% of the distillate and has a strength of 68 to 72% ABV. As Glenrothes casks are filled with an average strength of 68.9%, which is higher than most distilleries use, which use 63.5% usually, you can say the casks are filled with spirit as it comes out at second distillation. The casks are mainly sherry casks to achieve a fruity, aromatic taste the Glenrothes stands for, but also bourbon casks for a nice balance of aromas. The whiskey that matures is carefully aged and chosen for bottling at the peak of maturity. It was famous for its vintage releases. Maturation takes part in Spanish sherry cask and to a smaller amount in American oak to look for an ideal balance of aromas. Uh, the light, clean and fruity new spirit that leaves the stills with their tall swan necks is matured to be a whiskey with a ripe bouquet of berries, candied fruits, sometimes more spicy, sometimes more floral. And each of the vintage releases had its own variation of aromas. So this one that we're going to taste now was distilled in December 2013 and put into oak casks. And I think this is ex-bourbon, which is unusual for Glenrothes. It's unusual to get a Glenrothes that hasn't touched sherry. And it was bottled in May 2023. It's one of 728 bottles and has an ABV of 54.4%. And it's reasonably coloured, you know. You'll see from the nose and the taste what it's been in. It has nice tears. Very nice tears. Quite clingy, vitreous, viscousy. You get the lemon citrus, limoncello, lemon, the kind of lemon wipes you got when you had to wipe everything down during lemon scented wipes that you got during COVID. There's pear drops, OT biscuits, and vanilla. But it's quite a subdued nose. wet leaves, overripe plums, a hint of damp earth. It's surprisingly creamy. Lots of vanilla, caramel popcorn, barley and butter and maple syrup topped pancakes. And then you get that citrus, the mandarin orange and pickled jalapenos. And there's a slightly lighter wood and black pepper. You can tell this one is quite young, 9 years old. And you get the tropical fruits and the golden syrup on the mouth. And there's a pepperiness, white pepper, toasted oak, cooked apples. And the alcohol comes alive in the mouth. It's quite spiky at times. It's got a sort of medium weight in the mouth here, with an oily texture. It's not so much heat, surprisingly, but it is extremely raw. It's got that numic spirit element to it, grain sweetness, green wood, banana and pineapple. And there's a bit of a bitter plasticky note at the back. And the finish is get that sort of apple crumble with oatmeal rather than shortbread. Vanilla cream and that warming spice. The taste fades, but the alcohol hangs around for longer. Get lemon, white sugar, black pepper, and the kind of salt spray that you get from the road when they've gritted it. A touch of oak, white grapes, and it's like these really cheap powdered sugar donuts that you get in America. Right, we're trying 5 drops of water to see if we can improve this. I ended up with 6. It was a high ABV, it was 54.4%. And you get a lovely Scotch mist. So let's see. Still get the high ABV, the alcohol still coming through. You get vanilla, toffee, but white spirit, citrus, butterscotch. It's quite cakey, fatty, and there's a bit of white grape there. I think the water rounds it up a bit, quite a lot actually. The bitterness without water dissipates, and you get this sort of lovely orange oil sweetness, and a much richer fruit and vanilla, bitter fruits, vanilla, peaches, and it's quite creamy. And on the finish, it's like balsa wood, skins of popcorn, white pepper. It's very young and spirity. So I think this is nothing to write home about. It's and when you look at the price of this, a full bottle would cost £130. It's massively overpriced, and I can sort of see that Glenrothes doesn't work with ex-bourbon. It must taste sherry. So we'll cleanse your palate. So our final whiskey tonight is the Glentauchers 2008 14-year-old sherry cask, bottled at 54.6%. So Glentauchers is situated in Strathclyde, just a few miles from Keith, at the road to Creganachy. No visitor centre, and it's probably that's why the distillery is not very well known. But the more important reason is probably that there are very few bottlings of Glentauchers. Almost the whole production is used for blended whiskey. It was in 1897 that James Buchanan and W.P. Lowry, blender in Glasgow, founded the Glentauchers distillery. Buchanan was not unfamiliar with the processes of making whiskey, blending and selling it. And he was confident and determined and had chosen a very favourable place for the distillery. It was next to a main road, and the railway line was at the back that could be used for the construction of a siding. James Buchanan and Company Limited became the sole holder of Glentauchers in 1908, and he already had become very successful with his Buchanan blends. 1910 saw the merger of the Buchanan and Dewar groups, and the company became part of the DCL, Distillery Company Limited. In 1923, from 1923 to 1925, extensive renovations were done. A steam engine was purchased in 1955, electricity installed in 1958, and 4 new stills installed in 1965 to 1966. During the war, the First World War, the distillery was closed. In 1985, United Distillers took over Glentauchers and mothballed it again. Allied Distillers acquired Glentauchers in 1989, and since then the distillery has been producing again. Allied Distillers became part of Pernod Ricard in 2005, and therefore Glentauchers today is under control of the British subsidiary Chivas Brothers. Production is done with pot stills, as is usual for malt whisky production in Scotland. But Glentauchers distillery was one of the few that made some experiments with producing malt whisky by continuous distillation in 1910. But that ended without satisfying results, and the distillery concentrates on its pot still distillation. The output is 1.9 million litres, although the capacity is double that. Malting isn't done at Glentauchers since 1963 when the malting floors were mothballed. The water is taken from the Rosary Burn that flows into the River Spey. The mash tun is covered with a copper lid and can be filled with about 12 tons of malt. There's 6 washbacks made of Oregon pine and they have a volume of 360,000 litres altogether. 3 wash stills and 3 spirit stills are at the heart of the Glentauchers distillery. They're pear-shaped and they stand side by side in the still house. So, Glentauchers is a key component in the blends, Ballantines and Teachers. And there's another blend Glentauchers is closely related to. The founder of the distiller, James Buchanan, is the father of Black and White as well. There's only ever been released one official bottling of Glentauchers single malt whiskey by the distillery itself, a 15-year-old in 2000. Gordon MacPhail, Duncan Taylor, Douglas Lang, and some smaller independent bottlers offer releases of the Speyside distillery. But Glentauchers is not a single malt that's often seen. In its character, it shows fruity, malty, and sweet aromas. So this one tonight, this Glentauchers, was matured in sherry cask number 859-01123 for 14 years. It's a release of only 692 bottles. Bottled at cask strength, 54.6%. Non-chill filtered and natural coloured. Let's see what we have here. So it's got a lovely colour. This is a 14-year-old Glentauchers, probably only the second or third Glentauchers I've ever tasted. And it has nice tears. And you get dried banana chips, strawberry laces, and that little hint of leather. There's a little touch of pepper and a malty fruitcake. Salted toffee, dried fruit, orange peel, and oak char. And you get that sort of honeycomb, milk chocolate, stewed plums, and cinnamon, and that clove spice. It has a heavy sweetness. Caramel, it's like crunchy bars. An Eccles cake, the pastry and the filling. Sticky licorice. Figs. Sugared plums. Nutmeg. mince pies with a good helping of brandy butter. There are notes of polished wood, but then you get baked apples with treacle and raisin, and then the undercurrent of charred bananas. And on the mouth, maple syrup, uh, raspberry jam, and custard creams with a lovely warming spice. And caramel, red berries, sweet spices and marmalade, and rich fruit cake with some lighter apricot notes and woody spice. It's got a soft mouthfeel, but it's got an intense flavour. There's barrel char and hints of sweet cured bacon. Leather and rich earth. Growing up bitter dark chocolate cake and rich raisiny sweetness and black licorice to balance. And, you know, these nut and raisin chocolate bars with a thick, jammy feel to them. Flavours of rum soaked dried fruits and marmalade on fresh farmhouse toast. And more rich fruit, Cox's apples, and dates with a crumble topping. And on the finish, chocolate orange, cinnamon, sherry sweetness, juicy mouth coating, long and sweet, with black pepper and delicate florals, uh, spice pastry, rich fruit, lingering berries, chocolate, and a hint of smoke. And more autumnal flavours develop in the finish. Apples and pears. The sweetness leaves the impression of homemade honeycomb, cooked just a tad too long. I'm going to add, this one was at 54.6. I'm going to add 5 drops of water to this. And I carefully measured it. And beautiful Scotch mist on this. You know, my palate cleanser was Peter's Yard sourdough biscuits. On the nose, this now reminds me of sourdough crumpets and creamy chocolate. That leads into plump raisins and freshly baked sponge cake. Try them out. And there's heaps of dried sherry-soaked fruit with dates, sultanas, and prunes, all supported by candied nuts and iced fingers. And on a finish now with water, you get the dense drying oak lingers, backed by rich baking spice and drizzles of burnt caramel. Dinner. Glentauchers 2008 14-year-old cherry cask, cask number 8901123, bottled at 54.6%, is a big boy, to be sure, from a fantastic cask. It's a little extreme, but you know, some extremities are simply lovely. That is a top shelf. So, final thoughts? Well, I'm very fond of Glen Moray, especially as it is in Elgin, where my wife was born and raised. The whiskey from Glen Moray tonight was pleasant but unexceptional. Not far from Elgin. The Miltonduff was a sherry bomb, but lacked complexity. The grain from Glasgow, where my mother was born, the Strathclyde, it lacked complexity too, considering its age. But it was very drinkable. The Glenrothes was pleasant, but overvalued. But, you know, the star of this tasting was the Glentauchers, which is an extremely lovely dram. Thank you for listening.